We're joined now by this week's guest, our beast of the week, Adam Grant. Adam is an organizational psychologist. He's a professor at the University of Penn's Wharton School of Business. He's the best-selling author of The Originals, Think Again, Givers and Takers, and Hidden Potential. He was the youngest tenured professor at Wharton at 28, and he's known for his work on motivation and creativity. And Adam inspires people to rethink their beliefs by asking how instead of why. And I will tell you, my favorite anecdote of being with Adam is that the two of us were at a conference together in Sweden, in Stockholm, 2 years ago, and we were posing for photographs. And I looked around to see what he was doing, and he was doing a handstand.
What?
Yes. And I was standing there trying to look, I got my hands in my pockets. Was this angle good?
Trying to look like so cool.
Yeah. And he was upside down. He's a former junior Olympian diver.
What is it with these people? How dare you?
We need to have some underachievers on the pod. I'm beginning to get a sense of inferiority about this whole thing.
I really am. Okay. I'm excited for this conversation. You know what? I'm going to be transformed on the other side. I'm sure of it.
Adam, I think of you just as Adam, one of my work friends. And so I've never actually really looked at your bio. And when I did in preparation for today, I realized you're officially called an organizational psychologist. And I thought I should ask you to explain to us what that is, because it makes it sound like you're going to come and declutter our desks. But I know that it's a bit more than that.
Well, I would like you to come and declutter my desk if you're available for that after.
Can't do it. I can't help with your closet either. And I definitely can't cure your OCD.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah, disappointing. No, I study in a lot of my job, I study how to make work not suck.
That feels very validating.
Are you saying your work sucks right now, Sam?
No, this part doesn't suck, but work has sucked in the past. I feel that's a very useful endeavor.
It could be. I feel like work has been demotivating and meaningless for too many people for too many centuries now. We ought to do something about it.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Don't thank me yet. We'll see how this goes.
We're going to ask you for a lot of insight today, so I hope you're prepared to fix everything in our world.
Done. Bring it on.
Okay, thank you so much. It does feel to me like the entirety of the globe right now is in a brace for impact position, like on an airplane. Everybody's kind of thinking, like, what is coming our way? We know it's something. We know it will be dramatic. How does that translate into the workplace? People must be having Zooms all over the place, trying to figure out what's coming next.
I think a lot of people are avoiding their Zooms for the most part. But yeah, I think, in some ways, what we're seeing right now is the opposite of what happened during the digital revolution. So I remember right around 2000, as I was just starting to think about what it might mean to be an organizational psychologist, there were just tons of leaders who didn't believe that the internet was going to change anything. I remember one of my first projects was at a bookstore called Borders. You might remember it. Watched it go out of business. Similar things, I think, from different distances. We could all see BlackBerry, Blockbuster, Kodak, Sears, Toys R Us. And what was so fascinating to me then is that once you believed that digital disruption was real, it was pretty obvious what to do about it. You need a website, you need some kind of digital distribution mechanism, and you could sort of figure out the next steps. I think we're dealing with the reverse of that now, which is everybody believes that with AI and many other changes on the horizon, massive change is coming, but nobody has a clue what that looks like. And I think it's unsettling for a lot of people. It's paralyzing for some. It's anxiety provoking for others. And probably the biggest response to it that I'm seeing is called threat rigidity, which is basically I'm worried that something bad is happening. I don't know what it looks like, so I'm just going to focus narrowly on the things I can control.
I feel like I see that almost everywhere I look.
I don't know what to do about it, by the way. I just name these things and then, good luck.
I guess I was thinking, Sam, were you meaning that brace for impact because of the results of the election? And was Adam talking about brace for impact because of the oncoming AI storm?
I actually think that it's both things because, obviously the fire hose of disinformation during the election season is really emblematic of how much we've given over to these tools, how little we understand them, how they're evolving is going to impact all of us for the rest of our natural born lives. And of course, we have an administration coming in that's going to blow everything up in a probably pretty significant way. So I think writ large, brace for impact holds.
Adam, do you think it's likely that the new administration is going to blow everything up?
How would you define blow everything up?
Well, it was Sam's expression. I'm tossing back to Sam.
I mean, blow everything up. I mean, undo norms, make sweeping changes to government agencies, act quickly to just make big sweeping social changes.
I think there will be a lot of attempts to do that. I think there's an open question about the strength of our democratic institutions and how easy it is to actually transform them. But I think that goes to a more general point, which is we are remarkably bad forecasters as human beings. We love to believe that we can look into a crystal ball and see what's coming around the corner. And the reality is that even the world's best professional forecasters get it wrong all the time. And obviously, I've been hearing from a lot of liberal and Democratic voters that they're terrified about what's to come.
Well, hold on a minute. I mean, not least the pollsters, right? The polls were completely wrong. So they feel like the first institutional, I know they're not an official government institution, but the polling was so wrong that no wonder we're bad at predicting what's going to happen.
And the polling's the easy part, right? All you have to do is figure out there whether the people you've talked to are going to do what they say they're going to do and whether they're representative of the population. The much harder part is then asking, okay, what are the second order consequences of the outcome of the election? And I do think it's really worth pausing to think about the counterfactual there. So I remember if you go back to 2020, pretty much every Democrat I knew was celebrating. But now with the benefit of hindsight, is it possible that the world would have been better off or America would have been better off had Trump won in 2020 as opposed to 2024? There would have been no January 6th. There would have been no lie about the election. We wouldn't be worrying about RFK as health czar now. I think there's so many ways that what looked like a good outcome then might actually have been a bad outcome in the long run. And this is how it always goes with forecasting, right? What seems like it's worth celebrating turns out to be, extremely disappointing or unsettling, and vice versa. And so I think for me, that's a dose of humility, right? To remember that, yeah, there are things to worry about around the corner, but they could always be worse and they might be better than we think.
I guess I'm trying to make Sam feel better here, but I spent some time over the weekend with people who've spent some time with the Trump transition team. And their point of view on it was that Donald Trump is ecstatic to be in this position, that he didn't think it was happening. The threat of jail is now off his shoulders. And actually what he wants to do is ensure a good economy and have a good time. He wants to invite all his friends to the White House. He wants to play a lot of golf. He's 78. And actually, he doesn't want to spend his last years in constant fights with people. That I agree seems unlikely because that's one of his sort of default positions. But actually, what he wants to do after a fairly difficult 4 years is enjoy himself.
But his friends are Nick Fuentes. They're dinner companions. That's the problem for me. Although I do have a theory about RFK Jr., which Joanna has heard, which is that I'm not very worried about him at all because I think that Trump will get sick of him very quickly because he doesn't like people around him with gravelly voices. And I do understand and appreciate that his gravelly voice does not indicate that he has a terrible cold. But I think in the end, it's going to disgust Donald Trump because he doesn't like any symptoms of anything in his purview.
Not a theory I've heard before, but I will say I've never been so excited about Trump being quick to fire as I am right now.
I'm so excited about that. I do have a question because there's been so much, this has been a really tough election season. There's been so much hurt. There's been just so much mudslinging. It's been a terrible experience. And that must come into the workplace. Our workplaces can be so polarized. Do you think that there are practical ways for employers to create an environment for open discussion without fueling division? How do you look at that in a way that's useful and practical? How should an employer look at that?
I think it's really hard. So Accenture did this fairly effectively a few years back. They had a Building Bridges initiative where they encouraged people to talk about politics and religion and other potentially divisive issues. They did it with moderators, and they said, we're going to come here to listen to each other and learn from each other. And I think in that case, what they were able to discover was they have strong norms of professionalism, and people were very concerned about ruining their reputations or, making a career-limiting move. So they tended to communicate in fairly respectful and thoughtful ways. I think what we're seeing in most workplaces is not that. There's some brand new evidence from BetterUp, where I chair a center and serve on an advisory board, full disclosure, that the vast majority of people don't want to talk about politics at work. And that people who do end up more stressed out and less excited to come to work. But that unfortunately, a lot of political discussion is happening in the workplace because our neighborhoods are fractured, our families are split, and people don't feel like they have another place to talk about it. So it just kind of comes out. I think we're seeing more and more organizations just discourage political discourse at work. You obviously can't ban it, but it's pretty hard to focus on your job when we're talking about where we stand on issues of abortion or on guns or immigration or fill in your hot button. So not the best way to get people to think creatively or to focus.
Right. I mean, how do you avoid it? How do you put mechanisms in place to shift people away from that election-related stress and channel their energy? Just more projects.
Not more work.
More work. More burdens.
I think the answer might be more meaningful work.
Okay.
A lot of people are feeling helpless right now. And the best antidote to helplessness is a sense of helpfulness, which means if I'm working on an important problem or I see the people around me need my support, that's going to be something that grabs my attention and allows me to concentrate on something other than what's going on in the world that's beyond my control.
But the people who voted for Donald Trump aren't feeling helpless.
No, I think that's fair.
They're the angriest winners in the world.
Well, are they actually? Or are you just falling for that stereotype? I mean, the amazing thing to me is that there hasn't been any rioting. This has been a very sort of peaceful resolution to what was, as you say, a very fractious election. But actually, you look outside, the sun is shining. It feels very normal.
This is one of the patterns we see repeatedly, right? So we tend to project our emotions out into the future as lasting much longer than they actually do. If you look at the data after the 2008 election, for example, McCain's supporters thought they were going to be much more miserable than they actually were when Obama won. If you look at post-2016, voters in Democratic states and liberal voters within about a week to a week and a half had gone right back to their baseline levels of happiness after Trump won. So there's an adaptation period, right? We all have what's called a psychological immune system along with a physical immune system where we start to find silver linings, we make sense, we shift our attention to things that we can make sure go well. And, this sort of event that people think is either amazing or terrible doesn't end up taking over our lives as much as we expect it to.
What kind of effect do you think that empty promises have on people? Because, elections are obviously full of them, but we seem just surprised and disappointed every 4 years when we hear them again and nothing comes to pass in the way that we thought it would. Does that go into kind of the big stew of the erosion of the public trust?
I think so. I think that it certainly seems to breed cynicism. Mm. And when people get cynical, they either disengage altogether or they end up with this motivation for chaos that we've seen rise in the last few years, which is, a growing number of people, regardless of ideology, saying, you know what? I don't care who I'm voting for. I know what I'm voting against, and we need to blow it up and get the elites outside of Washington. And I do think that's in part a consequence of promising that we're going to make change and then not seeing it happen. I think at the same time, though, people should be much more aware than they are of just how hard it is to get anything done in a giant bureaucracy. Every time I hear a conspiracy theory about Washington,
right?
As somebody who spent time serving on the Defense Innovation Board at the Pentagon, I'm like, I actually wish that people had as much power as you think they do, as small groups of leaders. They might actually get something done for once.
Isn't that actually what to some people might be exciting about the idea of someone like Elon Musk coming in and snooping around government? I mean, it's very clear that a lot of government is too big. It is too slow. It doesn't work for people. And you can sense that people want change. And why wouldn't we bring in our biggest, most successful innovators? I'm not saying that that his behavior on X is anything to emulate. But why wouldn't we be excited about someone who's got as extraordinary a brain as Elon coming in and at least having a look at it?
Well, one, because there's a lot of evidence that people who are high achievers in business actually fail in politics, because the trial and error, I'm just going to keep taking on ambitious goals and doing whatever I can to pursue them, overlooks the fact that the way that you solve problems in politics requires relationship building and coalitions. Not exactly Elon's strong suit.
Not exactly.
I think also, if you look at what makes Elon a great innovator in particular, he's a genius when it comes to hardware engineering. Right? I think about building rockets and electric cars. I don't think that he's our greatest manager. I wouldn't necessarily hold him up as an exemplar for a lot of the leadership skills that I study and teach at his alma mater. So I think that if we want to bring somebody in, we ought to bring somebody in who's an expert at organizational change, somebody who's great at leadership.
But isn't one of the things that Elon is good at doing, and one of the things that the tech world prides itself on doing, is thinking in new ways? And very clearly, especially with the advent of AI, people are going to have to think in different ways. And I totally get your point about Elon's reputation for management, but the things he's been successful at are things that people said you couldn't do.
Yeah, Joanna, I'm sympathetic to the argument. I think, though, you're putting too much faith in one individual. Let's not bet on, Iron Man. We have an image of a few super geniuses who we think can do anything and everything. The great news about the American government being as enormous as it is there are tons of pockets of really smart people who have great ideas that are not being heard. And so what I would do is let's go to some of those people. I think about, on this Defense Innovation Board that I was part of for a few years, one of the things we did was we visited different military bases. And we tried to find people who identified themselves as loyal oppositionists, people who were constantly challenging the status quo and getting themselves in trouble because they were kind of bucking the authority of middle managers, but they were doing it because they were passionate about the mission and they were looking for a better way. And I would say when you've got an organization of hundreds of thousands of people, actually we're talking millions in the case of the overall government, let's start internally and find the disruptors before we go to outsiders in tech who may not have a clue about how government works.
Yeah, it's also finding someone who has an impulse or a desire to work for the public good, which, you have to find someone who wants to give themselves over in a public service capacity also. And I don't think that he meets that marker, in my opinion.
I just feel less afraid of bringing outsiders in to take a look at things, because sometimes I think that's what you need. But Adam, what is the best mechanism now for the Democratic Party to figure out where they go?
That's a really good question. I think there's just a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking happening right now. And I think people are too quick to reach conclusions and much too slow to start running experiments. So the first thing I would do if I were running the Democratic Party is to say, we actually have a great opportunity because we have lots of local governments around the country to do a piloting of different ideas and figure out what resonates with voters. What brings back, for example, the working class? What is it that's going to, to get people to think about the competence and character of leaders, as opposed to just the single issue that they might vote on? I think we can make a whole list of questions, and then there's a temptation then to just plunge in and implement solutions that seem reasonable or that voters tell you in focus groups resonate with them. I'm like, let's run the A/B test. Let's actually find out what works. And then, as ideas are tested at a local level, we can begin to scale them nationally. And I say we, suggesting that this should not be unique to the Democratic Party, right? Republicans should do this. I think that there ought to be an independent movement to do this as well. Last I checked, I think it was Churchill who said that democracy is the worst system of government except all the others that have been tried.
Yep.
And from my viewpoint, not that many iterations have been tried. Why not start experimenting more?
You are a professor at Wharton, which Donald Trump loves to remind people that he attended. What type of effect do you think that the next 4 years of his presidency is going to have on the school, if any? Will it shutter?
I don't know that it actually has much effect on the school at all. But I do think that, politics aside, when I look at the actual behavior of Donald Trump, it's the opposite of what we teach as great leadership.
Right.
My core principles are be a giver, not a taker. Be a learner, not a knower. And surround yourself with people who challenge your thought process, not the ones who just affirm your conclusions. I mean, it would be nice to have a president who reads a book occasionally. And I think that maybe now we're more motivated than ever to teach those principles to the next generation. I think about this every day. Every day that I walk into the classroom, I think, there is a young Donald Trump or Elon Musk in my classroom. What do I wish those leaders had known when they were in their 20s?
Can you get us his transcript?
No, I don't know how to do that. I don't even think it exists anymore.
Just give Joanna your pass key.
Yeah, if anybody's got his transcripts out there, the Daily Beast would be very happy to take a look at it. Similarly with his tax returns, the two missing documents that might have changed the course of history.
Joanna, do you really think that anything would be changed by the transcripts? We know that he wasn't a good student.
We just want to know because it would be delicious. It would just be delicious, and it would really bug him.
It's always interesting to have early insight into a character, isn't it? There might be a teacher who knew all along that he was going to be president or that he was copying someone else's homework.
I don't think we need that. We have The Simpsons, right? So all good.
Well, this was great.
I think we're still in a little bit of shock. I tell you what, I would like to ask you, Adam, this election has gone on forever, it feels like. And I think both sides are now sensing anticlimax. How does one deal with that? I mean, in the workplace, what are the ways to get people back and motivated again? One of the things you teach is motivation and meaning. How do we find that?
Well, I think probably this might be my favorite experiment I've ever done. Actually, a series of them. So I'll just take you back with a quick story and then try to answer your question. So let's go to the University of Michigan, where you have people on the phones calling alumni, interrupting their dinner and trying to get them to donate to the university. They get rejected all the time. People are like, yeah, I already gave to the university. It was called tuition. Leave me alone. And it's a very difficult job to find motivation in. I design a very simple intervention. It takes 5 minutes. Some of the callers are randomly assigned to just a 5-minute interaction. And a month later, they've spiked 142% in weekly phone time, caller by caller, and 171% in weekly revenue that they brought in.
Wow.
What happened in that 5 minutes? All I did was I brought in one scholarship student who told them where the money they raised was going. And instead of thinking about their jobs as harassing alumni, now they saw their jobs as actually enabling students to afford school. So they could see the tangible difference they were making in the lives of living, breathing human beings. And I think we all have jobs that make a difference. I think we often are disconnected from knowing what our impact is. And so what I would encourage people to do if they're trying to find motivation at work is to ask, if your job didn't exist, who would be worse off? And then the people and groups that come to mind, you need to know their names, their faces, and their stories because they remind you that what you do at work matters.
Sam, who would be worse off?
If I didn't do this job?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would be.
No one?
Oh, no. Oh, no. I'm crushed. Closes computer slowly, turns off all notifications.
I would be worse off. I would definitely be worse off. Yeah, I would be worse off. And our Daily Beast listeners would be worse off.
I found this fascinating. I'm sorry. My eyes started to twitch when we started talking about the Trump administration. I will admit that. It literally started to twitch.
Well, it's all happening. You're going to have to figure out survival techniques for the next 4 years.
I know.
Well, look, there are things that I know this is blasphemy to say with probably a more progressive audience, but there are things he's going to make better, not just worse. If we go back to the fact that nobody knew there was a pandemic coming, Operation Warp Speed might not have happened under another administration. We know that saved many lives. And I think it's worth remembering we don't know what's coming around the corner. And every change has losses. It also has gains. We can worry that the losses are going to outweigh the gains, but we shouldn't overlook the gains.
That is so funny because when anybody asks me that question, that's the single one thing I can say. Also, Operation Warp Speed was pretty great.
And it really mattered. The stakes were extremely high.
Yeah, America got their vaccine first.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I mean, let's hope we don't have another pandemic.
Oh.
Well, I think they only come every 100 years, don't they?
Give or take. But we're also more globalized than we were throughout that entire history. So it seems like it ought to be accelerating.
Never say never, Joanna. Fantastic. I love talking to you. Thank you so much.
I still want you to come and organize my desk, though, Adam.
Not only can I not organize your desk, mine is a mess.
I'm very good at organizing other people's lives, just not my own.
You shouldn't, though. There's some evidence that people who have slightly cluttered desks are more creative than people who are super neat. And it's not just the kind of person. You can actually clutter someone's desk and they become a little less linear and more divergent, which is sometimes helpful for having creative insights. So
there you go, Joanna.
Little mess goes a long way.
I'm going to let people know that because I think people come in my office and they're like horrified by my desk, which is it's a mosaic of sticky notes and papers and old computers.
I'm not licensing your big mess. I said a little mess can go a long way. Nice try, though.
Adam, thank you for joining us. I feel like you've left us on a very positive note, actually. Operation Warp Speed.